Hello, everybody. My name is Trevor Ngwane, and here is my presentation. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So the topic is racial capitalism undermines land reform, redistribution, and restitution in South Africa and in the global South. I will focus on South Africa. My name is Trevor, as I've said. Private ownership, class exploitation, and their entanglement with legacies of racial discrimination. These are the obstacles to progressive land reform. These are the barriers to land redistribution in South Africa. And when we critically review the nature, the speed, and the outcomes of land restitution, these are the problems that we find. In this paper, I'm going to argue that the concept of racial capitalism can provide us with the necessary analytical clarity with a powerful theoretical framing as scholar activists in the struggle to achieve land redistribution and socio-economic justice in the countryside. So why are we raising the issue of racial capitalism today? Land restitution and more broadly, land redistribution in South Africa has been very slow. For example, in the case of land claims by labor tenants, these are people who lived on so-called white farms and paid rent through their labor. The apex court of the land in South Africa, the Constitutional Court, took the unprecedented step of appointing a special master to put pressure on the government to fast-track the land claims. So this is how serious the problem is. In South Africa, we don't have a system of a special master, but the court felt they needed to create this for the purpose of speeding up, the land claims of the labor tenants. And in fact, in South Africa, we're also seeing, which is the focus of this panel, counter-agrarian reform processes. We're also seeing land reform dispossession. So, and also there's a reconfiguration of power relations and laws which speed up this taking back of the land which has been given to the people, and also slowing down the process more generally. Now, there are also policy retreats and reversals to an extent that, in fact, the African National Congress, which is the ruling party, is retreating from the much debated policy of land repossession without compensation. So this was being debated in Parliament. The ANC is now saying we must ask the landowners to donate land to the landless. So there's so much frustration that, even staunch advocates of land reform are losing heart. They are saying land restitution has failed. They are giving up. So clearly there's something very wrong happening in South Africa. Now, so in a way, we need to go to the root of the problem. Now, we all know that the starting point of any analysis of a complex social problem is to choose a conceptual lens or perspective which can guide that analysis by providing a broad parameter. So in this respect, one can use the concepts of agency and structure. Who are the social agents involved? How are the social, economic, and political relations structured? So one must keep that in mind. Now, going back to the concept of racial capitalism, I was inspired by Black Lives Matter. In fact, Black Lives Matter inspired many people in the world, including here in South Africa. There is a picture of the great George Floyd, who, through his death, made history. Now, Black Lives Matter resuscitated, at least in the USA, interest in the concept of racial capitalism. And then we too here in South Africa were actually interested, because actually we found out that even though in the USA they were now reading the works of Cedric J. Robinson, who wrote about racial capitalism, but this concept originated in South Africa. So, in fact, this concept came up with comrades called Martin Legasik and Dave Hampson in a paper they wrote in 1976. So there was a sense here that, in fact, in order to move forward, we have to go backward, go back to our elders, to those who walked the earth before us, to find out how they were theorizing, the South African Revolution. One scholar, activist who took forward in South Africa the concept of racial capitalism was Neville Alexander, who was a Marxist inspired by the ideas of Steve Biko of Black consciousness. Now, another important reason for our excitement here, my excitement about this concept, is that we realize that the ANC, the ruling party, and its partner, the South African Communist Party, do not necessarily embrace the concept. In fact, the South African Communist Party theorized the South African social system as a form of internal colonialism. So the SACP called it colonialism of a special type. Now, this allowed them to come up with what they call the theory of 2 stages of revolution. So if South Africa is an internal colony, the first struggle is to get rid of the colonizer by getting independence. So stage 1. And then once we have democracy, then we can start the fight against capitalism. So it was convenient for them to define South Africa that way. Whereas if you define it as racial capitalism, you'd want to wage, let's say, a multi-pronged dual struggle against both apartheid, both against colonialism and capitalism. So now today in South Africa, we find that the SACP and the ANC, even though we've now reached stage 1, there is no movement towards stage 2, which is socialism. So really, after 28 years of freedom, the land has not been returned. After 20 years of democracy, the stolen wealth has not been taken back. And we know that there was talk that when we defeated apartheid and moved to democracy, it was a miracle. But actually, as Ronnie Kasrils, one of leading members of ANC in the old days, guerrilla SACP member, he says the ANC entered a Faustian pact with the devil. So, the bourgeoisie in South Africa, white monopoly capital, said, okay, we'll allow you to take political power, but please leave the mines, the land, the factories, and the banks with us. So that was the deal. Now, this is where we are. So the land is still with white monopoly capital. So if you look at those pictures there, those are 4 books which describe the transition in South Africa. For example, a guy called Martin Maré calls it revolution deferred. Patrick Bond says it's an early transition. Adam Habib says it's a suspended revolution. Dale McKinley says it's a corporatized liberation. So everyone is critical of the outcome. Basically, maybe let's focus on revolution, suspended revolution. It's an unfinished revolution. It's still unfolding because we haven't yet got our land back. So it's most important that we revisit the concept of racial capitalism. But of course, we have to understand, racial capitalism as a conceptual lens, which means that we have to study it, we have to interrogate it, subject it to critique, develop it, sharpen it as a tool. Moving forward, we should know that with the land not coming back to the people, to the masses, in fact, there's enough statistics to prove this. So there are these popular hegemonic narratives about how Black people don't know how to farm, how they are not interested in farming, and even those who get their land back through restitution, how they failed, they are not able to actually farm, how they fight among themselves, and how big a mistake it is to give the land back to these people. But of course, we all know, as Marx said, that the ruling ideas belong to the ruling class. So it is not surprising that you've got these narratives going around. And as Antonio Gramsci said, private property is protected by guns and by ideas, by force and by consent. Now, the other point to make is that how is it possible that capitalism, the system which created slavery, colonialism, apartheid, land dispossession, how can it be part of the solution? So as long as capitalism exists, the new generations will be shackled with the continuities of oppression and exploitation from the past, from colonialism, from apartheid, indeed from capitalist exploitation. Now, as Amilcar Cabral, the revolutionary leader from Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau said, hide nothing from the masses, tell no lies, expose lies whenever they are told, mask no difficulties, claim no easy victories. So we have to speak straight about land from the perspective of racial capitalism. If you want our land, we have to take it back. And to take it back means breaking the law of private property, the law of capitalism. We have to take back the land by force if it is necessary. And this is not a dream. It is a dream that we have to make to come true. It is necessary. We must make it possible. If we don't make this dream possible, then our children and our children's children will remain landless. So, indeed, we have to decolonize our minds, shake off the bosses' ideology. We don't need bosses. We don't need landlords lording over the land and over us. The power actually lies with the workers and the peasants, the people who work the land with their hands. Marx said the working class is the revolutionary subject. So the bosses, we don't need, they must go. And they must go with their system. And their system is capitalism. Once we accept this, then the ground is cleared in our minds to think creatively about how to solve the land question, how to use the land to feed the masses, how to end landlessness, how to guarantee equality, justice, prosperity, and happiness on the countryside. So we have to name the beast, racial capitalism, and then we must slay it. So thank you very much. Thank you.